So, what being called a big fatty teaches us and can teach us spiritually, coming up right after this. Okay, good morning. This is Lucky Lynx. So I hadn't noticed this. I hadn't really necessarily been paying attention, but on this YouTube station, evidently there was a woman coming through on a lot of my posts and writing things like, you know, you're a big fat slob. Who would listen to you, you big fat slob? Your eating is out of control. You're so fat. At one point, I think she said, I wish you had a heart attack. And I thought, wow, this is perfect for helping me put together the things that I've been wanting to sort of share, that I've been learning in Tibetan cosmology and Tibetan astrology, and from working with clients in Tibetan astrology. There is so much here that I can use. I'm like super excited, so I can share with you guys. So we're going to use this particular individual as an example. I'm also going to use myself as an example. So let's because you guys all of you out there have a body, and all of you out there have certain things going on with your body that either that you like, that you don't like, or just to get to know your body better. First of all, our bodies are made up of a combination of the 5 elements. Now, I've spoken before on this station about the 5 elements, so I suggest you go back. I actually did a video on the 5 elements and how they interact with each other. So I'm not going to go into that right now, but I am going to say that your body is made up of 5 elements. Now, in your chart, we look at, and in your cosmology, it shows the makeup of what those elements are. So what happens is you come in because of habitual patterns with certain elements that dominate, of the 5 elements that dominate, and certain elements that are lacking. Those elements that are dominant in your chart make up your experience. So your experience will actually tend towards those things that are made up for those elements. If you don't do anything about it, you'll keep ending up getting these elements will be the dominant things in your life. Those elements that are either lacking or they're less, those are the sort of minority experiences that you get. So you could actually come in and you could be getting these experiences over and over and over again and missing out on these experiences unless something brings those elements in. And that's a lot of times when people go into relationships, they'll get someone with a different set of elements and then their experiences change. But when it comes to your body, there are certain elements that come together that make up your body, along with the animals that make up, but that's a whole other subject. So I'm going to set that aside, and we're just going to talk about the elements right now. The elements that are in the predominant elements will tell you a lot about what's going on in your body. Now, this actually eventually leads to Tibetan healing and how Tibetan medicine works. But for the sake of this and for what we're talking about here, I'm going to use myself as an example. I have 2 elements that are in the majority that make up my body shape and my body proclivities. Let's put it that way. And the 2 of them lead towards bigger. So when the 2 are together, they move towards bigger. So I'm 6'3", and by the time I was 12, I was taller than both my parents, and everyone always thought I was the eldest because I was so tall, always so tall. When these elements come together, they lead towards bigger. And what happens is my preference for weightlifting doesn't help with that, because I prefer to go to the gym to lift weights, and that sort of increases the element combination and it sort of makes me bigger. But that's fine with me because I kind of prefer that. However, when I do too much weightlifting and when I go too much towards those elements, what happens is if I don't balance it with the opposing elements, I get stiff and I hurt myself. So I can get I tweak myself at the gym. I'll push myself, and then it goes too far, and then everything locks up. And then, now the other thing that happens is that my elemental nature, actually, something in my astrology actually favors flexibility. So I'm extremely flexible. So when I go to yoga, I can do bridge with no problem. And what happens is I'll get to the point where these two elements that are in my dominant makeup get to a point where they're too much, and I need to balance it out. Okay, so the point of this is that there are certain elements in your makeup, in your cosmology and in your astrology, that are habitual patterns. These are the habitual patterns that you brought in with you. You came into the body that you have because those elemental habits become your karma, and then they go with you into the next life. So when you incarnate the next life, those elements start to form again because that's your habit. The conditions are right for you to form. Those elements start to come in again, and then you have a similar body that you had in the last life, okay? So what that also tells us is if a person is sort of bigger or smaller or their shapes, that tells us also the type of being they are, which has something to do with why that person actually came here and what they're trying to become. So what does this mean for us, and what does this mean for you? First of all, there is a specific elemental makeup to your body that you can change by balancing it. And when things are out of balance, we work very, very much to rebalance them so that we can be in optimum health. So like I said, when I do too much weightlifting, I got to balance it with yoga and qigong and things like that. Or just not doing anything. Sometimes I just need to take a break and not do anything. But there's a balance that needs to be struck there, and we work with the elements to create our optimum health so that everything runs smoothly. Now, the other thing is, what that means to you is that there is something going on in your body. If there's too much of one element, you'll have certain qualities going on in your body. If there's an absence of another, so like for example, if there's a lack of flexibility, that means there's an element that you have to bring in to balance it with. If there's too much flexibility and not enough, weight, something else has to come in to balance it. And so for example, this individual who told me that I was too fat, or I'm very fat, there's an interesting thing going on there in her elemental makeup and in her dietary choices, because as for what I'm gathering, she's a raw foodist, and what's happening is something in the elements that she's taking in and in the elements of her body is creating an imbalance. Now, what that means is it doesn't just have to do with the body shape. It has to do with what happens in the mind and the mood of the individual. So this individual is actually creating a situation where the body is creating digestive problems, and there's something going off in the spleen area, the stomach area, and it's producing a great deal of bile, and the bile is coming out in her speech. So it's coming out as hatred, negativity, bitterness, and mistrust and paranoia. All that stuff happens. So it's actually an imbalance coming from what she's eating, how she's eating it, and then her habitual karmic patterns that actually brought that in. The fascinating thing is this tells me where she had a great deal of past life experience. So I can tell what's happening from past lives from the way that she's behaving with this stuff. And it tells me if she's not likely to change it, where she's going to end up again, which is actually not a very nice place, because what happens is the imbalance creates a situation where food actually turns to fire in her mouth. She can't digest anything, and she can never be satisfied, which actually the way that she spoke and the way that she was insulting suggests she can't be satisfied. There's a sense of lacking. There's a sense of I don't want you to succeed. I'm unhappy. That all actually comes from the elemental imbalances, and actually the body sometimes tells us, often tells us, what's going on with that, and then we watch the body and the behavior. And then when we look at the cosmology, astrology, we have a complete picture. We can say, oh my God, this is where this person incarnated from. This is what they're trying to do while they're here. This is where they're likely to go next if they don't change it. Now there's more to that, which I'm going to talk about, which is really cool too, because I'm going to talk about her dietary stuff and how that dietary thing became like a deity. We're going to talk about that in a second. So the reason I'm saying all this is because you guys are dealing with people all day long, and you're dealing with people who, treat you poorly or treat you well, or there's certain things that you're dealing with in your body and stuff. It all has to do with how these elements interact, and the elements are just one part of it. But this is a good illustration. So, for example, I end up bigger because of the elemental combination, and which I'm totally fine with, because I prefer to be bigger when I'm skinny. I don't like the way I look, and I prefer it. I balance it the other way simply because I prefer to be bigger. I always have. When I was young, I was very, very skinny because that elemental combination created a real skinny frame, and I didn't prefer it on myself, and I didn't feel as good as I do when I balance it the other way. But again, if there's something that's out of balance in your elements, it can create body problems, and then you have to balance it the other way. And sometimes it goes so far out of balance that a lot of things have to be balanced to get it back in the other way. So there are people who have particular health challenges that keep coming up again and again and again. Now, there's one more thing that's going on with all of this too that we have to consider. There is stuff that's being sprayed in the air. There's stuff that's being put in the water. There's stuff that's in the ground that right now is throwing people's elements out of balance. So it's putting elements into people's bodies that they don't need, or that's creating an overabundance of something that they already have. That's putting them further out of balance, and then it's creating all sorts of problems for them as well. Now, that's a whole other video, but we have to consider that that is going on as well. That stuff is also elements that's being added to the system, okay? So consider that. You have all this stuff going on in your elemental makeup that makes up your body and your mind, and there's one more way I want to go with this now. So then let's talk about this woman and her and her desire to point out my fatness because I eat all the time, according to her. According to her, she's psychic. She said she's psychic, so I'm fat, I think was her logic. Oh, and by the way, I left one of her comments up. If any of you want to go back and tell her what you think about it, it's on my last video. If you want to go tell her what you think about it, you'll see it. But there's something else going on here with what we call dominion. Now, this gets really involved, and you kind of have to wrap a towel around your head, or you go crazy trying to understand all of this. But let me just say that there's one area in a person's astrology chart where we're dealing with what we call deities. Now, there are a bunch of magic squares that go into a person's astrology and cosmology, and they tell us so much about what a person's habits are, what they're likely to encounter, and even why they came here, what they're trying to be when they're here. But in this particular case, this is a very, 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 very tiny piece of this, but it comes into play here beautifully. There's something we call the deities area of a person's chart, and either sometimes that area can support the person, or sometimes it can consume the person, depending upon what elements are going on there. Well, in this particular case, it can mean that there are actual gods and goddesses, actual beings, actual demons, things like that that are supporting and or consuming a person. But there can also be like sacred cows or these ideals that people hold up there. So, for example, in her, so like football fan, I'm a mother, I'm a vegan. These things become sacred cows to us. They become these ideals, and then we deify it. And then what happens is, if it supports us, then we're productive and we can move forward and we actually succeed in that area. But when it shifts, because these things shift from year to year, day to day, month to month, hour to hour, what happens is it can consume the person. So this particular person has deified her diet, and what's unfortunate is it's not supporting her, it's actually consuming her. So it's making her angry, it's making her unhappy, and she's decided that she's going to project that unhappiness outward. That tells me that there's something else going on with her magic squares. There's one of the magic squares is particularly unpleasant because it puts a person in the position where they believe they know it all, and anyone that disagrees with them is beneath them. And I imagine that she has that running through her chart several times. And those people are real easy to predict because all they're going to do is they're going to take their own anger, their own bile that they're creating from their elemental imbalance, and they project it on the world out there and say, well, I'm perfect. And you'll see in the comment she made yesterday, she actually said that. It's everyone else that has a problem. So as I'm bringing all this stuff up, a lot of you may recognize these things at least playing out in your life in some way similarly. There might be some combinations of these things happening as well. There's another thing that you guys have to realize too, and I wanted to add this about the elements because this is really important. So with the elements change depending upon the year. So for example, on the 24th, we're switching into the new year, which will be the year of the metal rat, which means that will be metal. So we'll be influenced by metal. So some of you may feel an increase in your vitality and your success because the metal is what you need. Some of you, it may drain you. I actually believe that this particular woman will be drained when we switch into the metal year because I think what element she's got is going to be sucked out. But the other thing that happens is that element will affect your body. So some years you may find that you actually gain weight. Some years you may find that you actually lose weight. Some years you may seem more stiff. Some years you may seem more flexible. Some years you may feel like you can conquer the world. Then the next year comes and you're like, I don't understand what happened. I feel completely run down this year. And then the first thing we do is that we go to the doctor and the doctor prescribes pills, but that's not what does it. What you need is you need to balance the element that is opposite that, or reduce the element that's coming in and creating the problem for you. So for me, at this particular time of year, there are certain elements that are in play that actually make me more likely to even expand a little. And then in the summer, it changes and it's easier for me to maintain a different kind of body type. But I have to be cognizant of that, and I have to balance those elements so that I don't become stiff, so I don't become, so I don't let my weight go where I don't want it to go. And then in the summer, I can enjoy myself more and let this go a little more because I have other elemental things going on my favor. So there is so much going on with our weight, with our health, with our minds, with our lives and our experiences than people have any idea. And none of this stuff is taught to us when we grow up. None of this stuff is taught to us in the West. It's like take a pill and go on a juice diet and everything will be fine. Well, that's really not the case. If the elements that you need are not in that juice, you could throw yourself further out of balance. It could create more problems. As with this individual, her diet is actually creating an excess of bile. It's coming out in her speech, it's coming out in her hatred, and what eventually is going to happen is that's going to consume her, which is unfortunate, but there will be a reason for that as well. And then we look at the bigger picture and we go, well, when she is consumed, maybe then humility can emerge, and then she can go, oh, well, maybe I can become something bigger. But it will take work, and this stuff all takes work. We have to balance things, but we can't balance things. We can't see what's going on. We can't know how to do it unless we know what's going on, which is why we do astrology and Tibetan astrology and Tibetan cosmology, because it tells us all of these things. And this is all of the stuff that's going on day in, day out, whether you realize it or not. You can wake up in the morning, you can feel like hell because the elements of that hour and the elements of that day are just draining you. And then suddenly 6 o'clock comes around, you're like, I don't understand, I feel great. The element shifted, now it's supporting you and it's supporting what's in your chart, and you feel great. So I hope this gave you guys a little taste of something much bigger, and then can give you some hope and some ideas about what may be happening when you're dealing with challenging people in your life, because they're out there. These people, they may have an opposite energy from yours, or they may want to feed on you, or they may think they can dominate you, they may think they can bully you, whatever. That's nice. But if you know what's going on, if you know what the elements are, you can look at it for what it is, and you can laugh at it, and you go, okay, well, this is what's going on with this individual. I want to add to this before I continue, before I sign off. All of this, and this is the other thing. I think this is one of the biggest things, and this is the biggest thing that was beautiful about all that thing that this person said, and that I can say to you guys. In Tibetan Bond, we work to balance the body, we work to balance the mind, because we understand that those things are the vehicle for something that is much bigger, which is our spirit. And when we die, we know that the body and the ego die, but our karmic habits come with us to reincarnate. So we spend this time working on those habits, changing them and removing them so that we can reach enlightenment, so that we don't have to keep going over and over and over again, experiencing the same thing and suffering again and again and again, and being confused. Because in this confusion, when you're confused, we do hurt other people. When we don't understand ourselves, we create chaos and confusion for others, and we hurt them. And it's really not necessary. I'm Lucky Lynx, as always, wishing you success and good fortune in all that you do. Hey, if you guys would like to learn how to read the tarot, what I just told you was, I mean, it's so far removed from the tarot. However, I still love the tarot and use it all the time, and it's a wonderful tool. If you guys would like to learn to read the tarot, I have 2 classes, an intermediate, advanced, and a basic class. If you'd like to take those, either of those, contact me, 779-302-8009 or conjurehope@gmail.com. I've also got one in Mexican Loteria, playing cards, crystal balls, and how to read the... there's one more. Well, there's one more. And then if you guys would like to get your astrology or cosmology done, I can tell you what's going on with your elemental makeup, what's going on in your life, what's out of balance, what needs to be balanced, and how to balance that. Contact me, 779-302-8009 or conjurehope@gmail.com. I'm going to warn you guys, there is a wait, but the wait is definitely worth it. This is not something I just press a button and then get a printout for. This is something that I have to do by hand. It takes me a long time to do, and so there is a backup. I have a lot of clients waiting. And thank you so much for my clients who are waiting. Trust me, you will be very happy when you get it, and you will understand why the wait was so long. But if you want to contact me to get your chart done, your Tibetan Astrology Chart or your cosmology, 779-302-8009 or conjurehope@gmail.com. And then for those of you who have donated, thank you so much for donating. If you like these videos and you want to donate to help keep them coming, please, I will put my PayPal, my Venmo below. You guys are awesome. Remember, there's more to the body, there's more to the mind, there's more to you experience than you have been taught, than you believe. There is a lot at work going on here, and I'm going to tell you this as my final thought on the day. There is a rhyme and a reason to why you're here. There is a reason why things are happening to you, and you can change them if you choose.